Recording in progress. We are live. So just to get the ball rolling as we begin already preparing for Passover, it's March 3rd. We are still in the month of Adar, but coming after the month of Adar is Nisan and Pesach. And so Passover in particular has some of the most demanding preparations for any of our holidays. So there's a tradition you should begin preparing 30 days before, or even more than that. But some of the preparations for Pesach are physical, like all it takes to get your chametz out of your house and prepare the kitchen. But some of it is also preparing to lead a Seder, and some of it's the spiritual work of clearing out the schmutz of our souls. So Passover preparation often begins early. So I'm going to put on the screen the 15 steps of the Seder. And either in the chat or out loud, I want just people to, let's just make a questions pile of what questions do we have about the Seder in particular. No questions too small, no questions too big, but this way we can, both today and next month, I can try to help address some of those specific questions. And the 15 steps look like this. Okay. And at many seders, you chant this order. There's a few different melodies out there in the world. The one that I know goes, Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachza Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tzafun Barech Hallel Nirtzah. And these 15 steps of the Seder, it makes sense that the Seder has 15 steps or a specific order because the word Seder means order. Anyway, if people want to start writing in the chat, or you can unmute, what are some questions that you carry about the Seder? Either the specific steps you see listed here, or just other aspects of the Seder that you're aware of. No question too big, no question too small. Yes, Juliana.
So there is always a confusion about the vegetable and what constitutes this. Many discussions every single Pesach.
In your home or at Or Hadash or
Everywhere.
okay. So what vegetable are suitable for karpas? Okay. Okay. We'll go into that. Let's yeah, Karen.
Yes, I have a question about the matzot, because there's several lines in the Torah. Where the not soured bread is demanded, and it's first when Hashem Hashem orders it before, when the first time he talks about what's going to happen on this evening. You have to take a lamb or a goat, and you have to have it in your house for 3 days, and then you have to slaughter it, and nothing can be carried out on the road, and then the matzot are not the the matzot are already they are already mentioned, but there's so much time still, and they must not be soured with sourdough, and then there are many things going on, and then the Torah says, well, they had to flee and they had to take the dough with them, and that's why the matzot turned, didn't have enough time to
To
sour.
rise, yes.
So that's what confuses me.
Okay, so I'm calling that the biblical chronology of the matzot. Okay, it's an interesting question. We'll come back to it as well. Let's see. Anna, do you have any questions about the Seder? Throw one in the mix for us. You have to unmute. You have to unmute first.
Okay. I have too many questions. I have basically
Then you've
far
been hiding them from us. Come on.
too little ideas to ask a question. Maybe what is for Pesach Seder beginners like us, like me, my family? What would you say is the most important thing, or the most important point, or the most important? Yeah. Because it's a lot to follow. So what would you say is we should pay most attention to? Perhaps that's my question.
Great. I love that question. And actually, in the Haggadah, at least one rabbi gives us his answer to that question. He says, maybe you've tried to do this and this, but if you haven't done these 3 things, then you've missed it so far. So we'll make sure to see Rabban Gamliel's summary of what's the most important point. I'm going to keep putting people on the spot because that's fun for me. Eleanor, add a question to the mix.
Yes, thank you. What do the different colors mean? The blue color, gray, there are different levels of meaning, I assume.
Here in this list that we're seeing right now?
Yes.
I think that's just to help break it up, but let me look for a second to see if there's a logic to it. Well, there's a certain logic to it. If we the Magid, so that beginning of the second color, is the longest section of the Haggadah and the most definitely introduces a new section, so that makes sense that was divided. I don't think you could really justify splitting up matzah and maror, but then also it makes sense that the afikomen, the tzafun, comes at the end, marks the beginning of a new section. But I think mainly it was just the editor of this image thought it'd be easier to understand.
May I ask you another question, please? I
For sure.
do not know Hebrew, so I am wondering, are the words on the left just the Hebrew name, and on the right side is the English translation? Kadesh means first cup, and Urkatz means first hand washing, and so on.
Yeah.
Is that so? Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
approximately correct. The English is a little bit interpretive on the Hebrew. So yes, the Hebrew, this is the transliteration of the 15 steps. Kadesh just means to sanctify. And then it's telling you it means the very first cup and the first kiddush. So it's adding a bit. But also within these Hebrew terms, we could definitely spend some time understanding what the Hebrew itself is really about. So I'll point to just, so I'm going to put that in the chat. What do the names of the steps
Thank you.
really mean? In terms of the Hebrew words and etymology. That's a great question. I'll give you just
Thank you.
one for now, which is that, again, the Magid section. So the book we hold up on Passover is called the Haggadah, which has the same root as Magid and is related to telling a story. In fact, there at times has been a profession in the Jewish world of being someone who calls himself a Magid, which means a wandering storyteller, essentially. Okay, we'll come back to more in that question. And Miriam, I see that you wrote, my Chabad friends only eat shmura matzah. I think that's what you,
Yeah,
and
shmura, how do you say that? Shmura, I think.
yeah, shmura matzah.
Uh-huh.
And don't mix it with anything else except for the Hillel sandwich. Why do very religious Jews only eat shmur matzah, which is very dry and not tasty?
Yeah.
I'd say you're objectively correct that it's very dry, but I'd say you're subjectively,
You will.
because I like shmur matzah too.
Okay.
So what is shmur? The what and the why of shmur matzah?
Yeah.
We'll come to that also.
Okay.
The what and the why of shmura. Okay, I love that we're getting a whole big pile of questions. Juliana.
Yeah, talking about the Seder plate. So question number one is there's an egg on the Seder plate, but it's not actually in this list. Right? The question number two is over the years, as dietary challenges have changed, the lamb bone has, seen it morph into everything from a chicken bone to a piece of carved wood for somebody who is a vegetarian. So is, carved wood? I don't know. Is a chicken bone okay? For me, the chicken bone always felt a little strange, but yeah.
Okay, a chicken bone. I've seen it replaced by a beet. And then what'd you say? A splinter of wood?
It was a piece of somebody carved a piece of wood,
Oh, I see.
bone shape.
Okay, that
I mean,
one's
this
new
was
to me.
20 years, 30 years ago.
Yeah, so actually there's an interesting traditional source we'll see about some stress about having this lamb, the shank bone on your Seder plate. Even in ancient times, rabbis were stressed about that for a reason that we'll see. So the Seder has transformed over time in many ways, and so that's a good one to bring in. Juliana, yes.
Sorry, but since it seems like we've got a lot of beginners here also, I thought maybe you could talk about the orange on the Seder plate.
The orange on the Seder plate. Okay. And Tuvia, I see you logged on. If you're there, do you have a question going into Passover? No worries. Okay. All right, we've got a good.
Sorry.
Yeah, Juliana.
Question. Also maybe again for beginners talking about Miriam's cup.
Miriam's cup. Okay, super. And okay, and as is sometimes my way, we'll hit hopefully some of these questions today, but it's also a teaser into next month, and so don't miss next month either. So now a question for all of you. A certain scholar at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, he says that there are two types of Jews. There's people who like to make up these descriptions. There are two types of people in the world. There are whatever. So he says there's two types of Jews. There are Purim Jews and there are Passover Jews. There are Purim Jews and there are Passover Jews. And since we still haven't hit Purim yet, I thought it was important not to fully overlook it. So what do you think might make someone a Purim? What do you, we'll see his answer eventually, but what makes someone a Purim Jew versus a Passover Jew? How could you understand that differentiation? And I do see, Tuvia, that you added the question about why Sephardim traditionally are allowed to eat rice during Passover, but Ashkenazi usually do not. And that's the category of kitniot. We'll make sure to look at that too. Maybe think, yeah, Juliana.
I would consider myself a Passover Jew. And I think that's in part because of the fact that I'm not really fond of the loud and raucous noise of Purim. And I like that Passover is celebrating a freedom and not the death of, I mean, okay, yes, the Pharaoh dies, but I mean, it's a different type of celebration.
Okay, so I heard two things. One, maybe Purim versus Passover Jew could be about the atmosphere, and how frivolous, how much frivolity is in your holiday. Although Passover has 4 glasses of wine, so it can get louder. And then the other possible differentiation is what kind of story is being remembered, and maybe how much the vengeance aspect of that comes up actually in both stories a bit. But okay, anyone else, even just in terms of the name, do they identify as a Purim Jew or a Passover Jew? Or if you're not Jewish, have you been more excited to experience Purim or Passover? And then more philosophically, what do you think the difference could be? Anne.
Anne. I think it's different celebration. One is more Passover is with more preparation, perhaps, and perhaps also more rules, more mitzvot, and perhaps also more just with family, rather than just big party with dressing up and everybody around. And I hope I don't have to decide which kind of Jew I am just yet. I want to decide it later.
No problem. No problem. Okay, but yeah, that's a nice distinction. Definitely Passover, while we will have a nice Seder at the synagogue, Passover is traditionally very much a family-centered, home-centered holiday, while Purim is definitely a bigger communal one. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have a Purim or Passover kind of thought? Christina, have you enjoyed Purim or Passover more?
I've been only once to a Purim party, and this was very noisy. I didn't enjoy it very much. But I've been a few times to bigger a Passover event. And it was also very loud, but it was more my style. Yeah. So
Okay,
yeah.
super. All right, let's take our attention to this interpretation that one scholar brings. So first, we'll look at two sources from the Torah that in some way inspire Passover and Purim. So in the book of Exodus, in a portion we
Make
just,
it a little bit bigger.
yeah.
Thank you.
In the book of Exodus, in a portion we chanted not too long ago, it says, V'ger lo toneh v'lo tilchatzenu, ki gerim heitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress them, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not ill-treat any widow or orphan. If you do mistreat them, I will heed their outcry as soon as they cry out to me, and my anger shall blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword, and your own wives would become widows, and your own children would become orphans. This text doesn't specifically say Passover, but it highlights this often repeated phrase, which comes up in different passages, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay, don't forget that you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Don't forget that you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay, and therefore you should not exert that same oppressive malice against others who are in a vulnerable spot. And the widow and the orphan are two, and the stranger are three traditional categories in this biblical society of the people who are most vulnerable. Yeah. Okay. Then in Deuteronomy, we have this source. Remember, Zachor is the Hebrew word for remember. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear of God, Amalek, who is both an individual and a tribe, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down the stragglers at your rear. Therefore, when the Lord your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, in the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. And this passage is something that we also traditionally chant in the Shabbat immediately before Purim, even though it doesn't make sense in our annual Torah reading cycle. And even though the book of Deuteronomy happens 500 years before the story of Purim, still Haman is considered a descendant of Amalek, and so this passage gets connected. But what's interesting here is this command to remember what the most evil person in this generation did to your people, and to blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And it's a strange phrasing, to blot out the memory, do not forget. So simultaneously, there's a message of remember this, remove the blot out the memory, but do not forget. Okay, so those are the sources that we're going to take with us as we see Yossi Klein Halevi's distinction. Jewish history speaks to our generation in the voice of two biblical commands to remember. The first voice commands us to remember that we were strangers in the land of Egypt. And the message of that command is, don't be brutal. There could be other messages, but he's focused on don't be brutal. The second voice commands us to remember how the tribe of Amalek attacked us without provocation while we were wandering in the desert. And the message of that command is, don't be naive. Okay. I would have looked for a more general summary of what remember that we were strangers, because I think it's more than just don't be brutal. I think you have to actively support those strangers in your midst. But anyway, he's distilling it to don't be brutal, don't be naive. The first command is the voice of Passover, of liberation. And the second is the voice of Purim, commemorating our victory over the genocidal threat of Haman, who was a descendant of Amalek. Passover Jews are motivated by empathy with the oppressed. Purim Jews are motivated by alertness to threat. Again, Passover Jews are motivated by empathy with the oppressed. Purim Jews are motivated by alertness to threat. Both are essential. One without the other creates an unbalanced Jewish personality and a distortion of Jewish history and values. I really think there's a powerful analysis here that of these two orientations and how we need some balance amongst them. How do you react to this notion of there's a type of Jew who's motivated by empathy with the oppressed. There's a type of Jew that's motivated by alertness to threats. Do you see yourself on this spectrum? Do you see others on this spectrum? Does this binary make sense to you, or how do you react to this passage? I see your hand, Juliana. Let's just see if anyone else wants to jump in first. Great, Eleanor, and then Juliana.
Well, this message seems to me very wise, and it is indeed very difficult to integrate both aspects. And I personally, I tended for a long time to be more a Passover Jew, to call it without being Jewish, but from the personality. And having gone through hard times, I was forced to learn that to be a Purim Jew is also very, very important. Otherwise, this empathy could turn into a sort of suicidal empathy. And being alert to threat is a very important form of defense, of self-defense. It's very, very important.
Okay, great. So next, Juliana, and then Eric, and then Anna. Juliana.
No, let other because I talk a lot, so let other people.
Okay, Eric.
Yes, well, it's a very interesting thought, which I find fascinating because it's so topical right now, also as a reaction to October 7th. There has been and the Gaza war, and there's a reaction to say basically this is we Jews, we feel threatened. That's the only thing we have to care about, and nothing else matters. And maybe this is also seems to be almost a majority, but there's also at least a significant minority of Jews who say, well, it's not suffering not only on our side, also on the other side. Empathy, maybe even oppression is also happening on the other side, and maybe also even to some extent through us. And I think this is a big divide now between the two in the political sense that you can feel also in maybe in Israel and also in the Jewish world. I would personally, if I hear that, I've never been a big fan of Purim, particularly not of the story of Purim, including the massive slaughtering that is taking place in the last part of the Megillah, and this is why I would feel much more at home in the Passover story.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah. And I think also in the contemporary moment, there's at least in the social media and news world, maybe not when you're actually talking to someone, but when you make an alertness to threat comment, people assume you have no empathy for the other. And when you make an empathy comment, people assume you have no care about the threat. So the binary is kind of enforced there. Anna, once you unmute. Yep.
Sorry.
You're good.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking along something similar, and I think when it's about having empathy with your own people being oppressed, then there is not so much difference, in my opinion, between a Purim Jew and a Passover Jew, because the two go together. When you feel empathy towards your ancestors or contemporary people being oppressed, then of course you also want for them to win against their oppressors. So I think that's rather similar. You can't really have one without the other, unless of course as Katrina said, you want to become suicidal, which I don't think you should. But when it comes to have empathy with not your own people, but other people who are being oppressed, then I think it's different. Because then, even though you're not the oppressor, you're just a bystander. It brings you in another situation. Then you can easier feel just empathy and say, "Oh, poor them," and feel so sorry for the oppressed around the world and the hungry, without necessarily feeling so much the urge to help or to do something, fight against that. And of course, when like in the conflict now or in other conflicts, your own role is not so clear, then it becomes more of a challenge. So how far will you go to liberate yourself and to fight for yourself and to celebrate their own victory without losing the empathy for the enemy, the others? And I think so. That's big. These are big and intertwined and complicated questions, really. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point because I think in previous generations, one didn't really have awareness and certainly not the ability to impact something that was happening on the other end of the world. So I think you're right that originally in this in the Torah, when it says, because you're going to be entering the land of Israel, you're going to have your own society, and then there will be strangers and vulnerable people in your society. And it's saying, in your own society, make sure you're not turning into the oppressor. But I think in modernity, there's been humanity in general, and there's been Jewish communities who've definitely expanded that ring of empathy to include, or tried to expand it to include, the oppressed around the world, wherever they may be found. And that does introduce new challenges. And is it, like you said, is it sometimes just the emotion of it, or can you actually make an impact when it's something that's so far away? Let's go to Juliana, and then Eleonora will come back to you.
Yeah, I think what Eric said, I would have definitely been part of what I was saying, that I think that nowadays you do need to have both of them, and we certainly are being confronted with that, both ideas. But I also, the context of both of these texts that you just showed us, I find it interesting because in the story of Purim, I mean, this is the decision to take on what ends up being a slaughter is a man-made decision through Mordecai. And it's revenge. It's a deep feeling of revenge. Whereas in the other story that is used to show Passover, the other context that's missing, though, is Hashem then telling, what was it, Saul, to then go murder everybody, which was unbelievably brutal. And this is a commandment from God. And
According to the Book of Kings.
According to the Book of Kings, yes. So it's like, okay, yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The revenge, the Purim story, I think I think one can somewhat easily remove the panic about the revenge fantasy, in that so for those who haven't read the Megillah recently, in the Purim story, we'll read it together in 10 days. But in the Purim story, in the Megillah, Haman is rallying people all around the country to slaughter the Jews. The Jews turn the tides, but they don't just go peaceful. They now want to take out anyone who was against them, was plotting against them, and they're able to do so. Purim, the Megillah, though, is it is a revenge. Well, it's a farcical, satirical, wild story at a time when Jews never would have had the power to achieve what it's fantasizing about. So it's coming from a very different place of mind. King Saul's story is a little different because it's coming at a point of being an independent kingdom. And so that one, I think, is actually demands further reckoning. But that's not related to, and then if we look at the Passover dimension, because you said Mordechai makes that choice. In Passover, the Egyptians pay the price of the plagues, which also needs interpretation. Is that because when a leader of a people is stubborn and unrelenting, the people pay the price, oftentimes more than the leader does, or at least both of them can. But yeah, in the Passover story, God is responsible for the Egyptians drowning in the sea or the death of the firstborn. So there is a difference there also. Eleanor.
Yeah. Well, seen from a historical point of view, it seems to me that particularly the Jewish people or the people of Israel are only allowed to be empathetic, and we honor and appreciate so much the Jewish contribution to the world, this sense of morality, the Ten Commandments, the deep empathy. But once Israel has to defend itself, and the people have to defend themselves, they are not allowed to do so. Whereas every other state in the world, it seems to me, is not only allowed, but is expected to have this, or to consider this balance between empathy and self-defense. Only the Jewish people, in my point of view, are not allowed to do so. And this is tragic because the Jewish contribution to the world is exactly that of bringing empathy and morality to at least the Western world. So maybe it could be that Jewish people have, how do you say, given a very high standard of morality to the world, very high. And so they are measured with that so high level of very high standard. And don't know, but I think this is a double standard in my view.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I think Jewish people also feel that self-judgment too, of sometimes wanting to hold ourselves to a higher standard because that's seems to be the tradition we come from. But also nations are nations with borders that need to be defended, and that's a normal part of nationhood. It's an interesting question. Okay, we're gonna continue in this source sheet and see a little bit more of. Okay, so now we're at looking at a source from the Talmud about this one time this happened at a Purim festival. The Gemara relates that Rabbah and Rabbi Ze'era prepared a Purim feast with each other, and they became intoxicated to the point that Rabbah arose and slaughtered Rabbi Ze'era. The next day, when he became sober and realized what he had done, Rabbah asked God for mercy and revived Rabbi Zera. A year passes, and Rabbah says to Rabbi Zera, "Let the master come and let us have a feast with each other." Okay, it was so fun last year. Come for another feast. And Rabbi Zera said to him, miracles, they don't happen each and every hour. I don't want to have a festival at your house, a feast at your house this year. Okay. This is an interesting text about not being naive. It's an interesting text about that even if a holiday tells you to drink, there should still be a limit, and we shouldn't push that. Yeah, the regret that Rabbah feels the very next day, and that also I'd say our actions in the past have even if someone forgives you, they don't forget, and so I think Rabbi Zera is right to say not coming over this year. I want to move kind of quickly to the next text, but does anyone have a thought about Rabbah and Rabbi Zera's crazy Purim?
Yeah.
Yeah, Karen.
There is some they're related, these two texts. It goes along both go along walk along a very long path of giving your fate, or having God rule about you and making miracles, and not really having any responsibility. You just do what's happening to you, and then taking responsibility, acting, handling problems, and trying to avoid them by action. That was the difference between Passover and Purim. And then it's also the difference between the Rabba Zera in the year before and the Rabba Zera in the year after. The miracle always stands for something. You don't have to do anything. You behave like a victim. You say, "Oh, I can't help," and then there's this miracle helping you to do stuff and to gain wie sagt man, eine Erkenntnis, to gain wisdom. Whereas
Insight.
if you have insight, whereas when you're responsible and do things for yourself, like what Rabbi Zera did the next year, the following year, he just didn't go there. He said, no, I'm not gonna go to your house anymore. And also the Jews in Shusha, they were not so lazy and so reluctant. They went into action. They took their fate into their hands. Of course, it was brutal, but yes, it's the Jewish religion is a religion of praying, of doing stuff, of acting, of handling things, of doing mitzvot and brachot, and like the Catholics, they pray and they pray for eternity, what happens after death. The Jewish people, they act during life. They try to be to act while they're alive. That's the difference between having things happen to you and feeling responsible about acting yourself. And that's a similarity between the two stories. That's what I think.
Interesting.
But,
Miriam, yeah?
Yeah, but here Rabbi Zera was brought back to life. So like he rose
It was a
from the
miracle.
dead, right?
Yeah, I don't think the Talmud wants us to think of this as a factual story, but as a story, yes, he was brought back to life, but he learned his lesson. I think that's key. He knows that such a miracle wouldn't happen every time. You have to defend your own skin. And so the Passover story, of course, it's a story that has inspired liberation movements, and but like to Karin's point, in the Passover story, the people of Israel mainly just feel completely oppressed and overwhelmed and can't even envision an alternative. And only through God and Moses does a change come to pass. And then even after that change, still the people have a oppressed mindset and we have to move to the next generation in the wilderness before there are Israelites ready to go into the promised land. So it's not in terms of how to go about liberation, it's not that productive of a story because it relies so heavily on God, which you have to have faith and go through a long process to get to liberation. But the how to do it is a little bit tough if you just look at the Passover story. In the Purim story, in the whole Megillah, God's name is nowhere to be found. It's only human action, or maybe the divine hand secretly. But yeah, Purim, like Karin was saying, is more people taking matters into their own hands. Still, it's not. Yeah, so that is an interesting distinction.
By the way, I'm sorry. I'm not sitting in the dark here. My camera is gone. I'm waiting for a miracle
Yeah,
to
no,
have it work
yeah.
again. Yeah, that's why it's so dark.
All good.
Yeah,
it adds a mystery
I
that
don't know what's happening
intriguing.
with my camera.
My camera here sometimes turns fully purple, so maybe I'll
Okay.
join you in another atmosphere. Okay, let's see. Do we have time for all three of these? Okay, we have to hit a few more Purim and Passover sources to then get to another
Something,
reference.
can I say something to this
Yeah.
story? It just occurs to me that what you know, they do not really talk about what happened. I mean, I would have assumed that you know, he might feel angry or upset that his friend slaughtered him, even though he was intoxicated. He might not, you know. But there's nothing about this. There's nothing. You don't expect me to celebrate with you again about what happened last year, or there's nothing like this in that. It's about it. It's just the miracle, and I find it interesting.
Well, I think you could. Depends how biting he said this. Mir, you could imagine him saying it pretty acerbically, pretty strongly. But yeah, okay. Then a couple other sources that give us context for where we're going. I think I said this. Well, I don't know. This came up somewhere else recently. It says that after the Song of the Sea, that Miriam led the people with timbrels, tambourines, and dancing. And then Rashi asks, how or why did the women have musical instruments when they were refugees fleeing Egypt? And Rashi says, the righteous women in that generation were so confident that God would perform miracles for them that they had accordingly brought timbrels with them from Egypt. They were so even though it was a crisis and they were fleeing Egypt, they were confident that one day there'd be a time where celebration was needed. And so when they grabbed their few possessions from their house, they made sure to bring their timbrels. Okay, so that's kind of have faith and be ready, know that you'll celebrate again. Okay, then we have this verse of the night of Passover, of Pesach itself. That was for God, a night of vigil, a night of guarding, to bring them out of the land of Egypt. That same night is God's, the Lord's, one of vigil for all the children of Israel throughout the ages. Okay, so the night of Pesach is a night of vigil for all time. And then this next source is going to interpret that. It was taught, this is a Talmudic source. It was taught in the Breita, in another text. Rabbi Yehoshua says, in the month of Nisan, our ancestors were redeemed from Egypt. And in Nisan, in the future, the Jewish people will be redeemed in the final redemption. The Gemara asks, from where do we derive that the final redemption is going to happen in the month of Nisan? From the verse that says it was a night of watching for Adonai, for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is the Lord's night of watching for all the children of Israel throughout their generations. Okay, so because it says about Passover that this night, this time of year has this special protection, then in the future, that's when redemption would happen too. This teaches that the night of Passover is a night that has been continuously watched, set aside for the purpose of redemption from the 6 days of creation, and will continue to be so until the final redemption. Okay, that's when redemption happens, in the month of Nisan. The Gemara asks, and how does the other Tana, Rabbi Eliezer, understand this verse? He derives from it that this is a night that is continuously watched and protected from demons. Yes, in the Talmud, there's lots of belief in demons, meaning that demons have no power on the first night of Passover. Okay, so the difference in these two interpretations, Rabbi Yehoshua says that Passover night is the night that one day some greater redemption will happen. Okay, so some kind of hopeful, positive thing will happen on Passover. The other interpretation is just that you don't need to be afraid on the night of Passover. Something negative won't happen, but not necessarily that something positive will happen. Okay, that's what these two points of view bring to bear. And I found this this interpretation of this resource from Rabbi Sharon Brous, who is a rabbi in Los Angeles, and she's pretty well known, and she has an interesting interpretation about these two sides. At the heart of their dispute is the question, is Passover fundamentally about reigniting the internal dream of redemption for our people and for all people? Or is it about liberating us for one night from paralyzing fear? Is it about a dream of redemption or a release from fear? We desperately need a redemption narrative today. So this year we will sit down to Seder and say, maybe this night will be the beginning of a new chapter, the turning of the tide toward redemption. That's the message of Passover according to Rabbi Yehoshua. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. So one thing to look for in Passover is one layer of the holiday is that Passover could be the final meal of all time. The final, or of this type of life. And after you eat the afikomen, the piece of matzah that was lost and then, hidden, and then the kids or whoever finds it, after you eat the afikomen, you're not supposed to eat anything else in the night, because maybe that's the end of the end of the final meal. Okay, so I think this is part of why the Last Supper is also connected to, the Christian Last Supper is also connected to the Passover Seder. But basically, maybe the Messiah is going to come, and our world will be redeemed. And this special meal, if we do it just right, and if the whole world is ready for it, redemption will come. Okay, that layer is not always the most obvious if we experience the Seder, but that layer is somewhere in the stitching of the Passover Seder, that this could be the final meal and redemption will happen tonight. So that's that first perspective. But this year, says Rabbi Braus, I cannot ignore the voice of Rabbi Eliezer. What if Passover at its core is not about some messianic, perfect, final redemption, but just about a little bit of protection? What if the meaning of the holiday is that there is one night a year in which we hold full awareness of all the danger around us, and there's always danger around us, but choose not to be afraid? Okay. Passover then becomes a defiant cry in the darkness. Tonight we will not be defined by fear. And if you think of Jewish people or others who have been in oppressed situations and know this story, or observe Passover in the camps or what have you, then there was some kind of spiritual power of we're going to feel like a liberated people for this one night, even though we're not there. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, Seder night is one night not to be dominated by those fears. Amid the haze of grief and loss, lost loved ones, lost love, lost opportunities, wages, job security, lost savings, and lost donations, lost dreams, lost college graduations. I think she was writing this during COVID. Lost proms and B'nai Mitzvah. We affirm that even within all of our lost, we are not completely lost. Only once the fear is lifted can we recognize that the blessing of freedom is the ability to reclaim our agency, even when so much has been taken from us. Now she goes fully into COVID. Let's see. We'll keep reading it. In a pandemic, we can't choose whose Seder's table we'll sit at, but we are still free to choose how we'll hold all that we've learned this past month, like how much community matters and what a blessing real friends are. Like the fact that health crises disproportionately endanger the poor and the elderly, and that the judge of society is not how we treat the most powerful, but how we care for the most vulnerable. And the undeniable truth that when profit and political expedience supersede moral responsibility, we will all pay the price. Without fear dominating our hearts and minds, on Seder night, we can hold the precious awareness that we are all connected by the invisible web of humanity that crosses land and sea. She's going for it all, every topic. That teachers deserve to be paid a lot more, that medical professionals are superheroes disguised as regular people. We can choose to lift up this now shared knowledge that norms can shift quickly, for the worse, but also for the better. And that we all need to work on building our resiliency tools, that we can live with a lot less than we might have thought, and that we all need to slow the hell down. That the world is really, really small, that our bodies are precious, and that touch is sacred and ought never to be taken for granted, that breath is a gift, and so is prayer, that there's still beauty everywhere. What we do with all of our new profound awareness is an expression of agency, the ultimate expression of freedom, and you can't have agency if you're frozen in fear. Okay, so basically, Passover, as we focus on in what ways do we feel free, and in what blessings we do have, and that we're able to gather for this holiday, then we can we remove our sense of fear. There are no demons. Demons are not coming tonight, and we can have an expression of freedom in that way. So she concludes, this year I will hold Passover as both a night of redemption and a night free from fear, because this year we need both. Our routines have been upended and our lives put on hold. We and our loved ones are profoundly vulnerable, and yet we're still here. So this year, amid the devastation and destruction, I pray that we're able to temporarily set aside our fear, precisely so that we can reclaim the dream of redemption that has stood at the heart of our shared story for thousands of years. May be a Passover of comfort, hope, and strength for all of us. So I think it's an interesting lens to bring towards Passover. Like this dual lens. One is, what would redemption look like for ourselves, for the world? And two, if I didn't feel all my fears that I feel in some way or another, how much blessing and freedom would I experience just by the removal of the negative, even without adding the positive? Any reactions to these two perspectives? I see two hands. I'll give just another moment. All right, Eleanor and then Juliana.
Well, this seems to me a very beautiful and intelligent text. And I would add that agency is not only the expression of freedom, but basically the expression of hope. And so to me, it seems that Passover celebrates the concept of hope. And for me, this is a basic aspect of Judaism. Although we are all going through constant tragedies, we never lose the hope.
Thank you. Juliana.
Actually, what Eleonora said is very good, because the concept of redemption, or thinking of Passover as a night of redemption, okay, whatever. Because I think that, for me, that story of the man who is told that the world is ending and is planting a tree anyway, is, I think, one of the most important stories. That, maybe not, but you have to have something for the future anyway. And you think about, what can you pass on? Whereas I agree that, having the night of Passover as a night to have hope and feel free from that fear, I think is really lovely.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, we saw that text on Tu B'Shvat of if your friend calls you up and says the Messiah is here, get over here. If you're in the middle of planting a tree, or middle of building a house, or maybe you're at work and submitting your final report, finish the report, finish planting the tree, do the work, and then go see if Messiah redemption has arrived. Karen, did you mean to unmute?
No, I was unmuted all the time.
Oh, okay.
But thinking, for me, redemption is being free from fear.
Okay, so they could be the same.
It's being fearful is a state of being tense and closed down and caught within yourself. So
yeah, on the personal level, for sure, or psychological, spiritual. But then Karen, can I follow up with you, Karen? How do you then see Passover or redemption for more than just oneself, right? Because the message of the Passover liberation or redemption is that all of the Jews, or all of the humanity, should reach this liberation. So do you have a way of expanding that vision?
I'm mute on the wrong
Now you're here.
wrong time. Yes. I think the world and all the people within it, there is this added fear. Like I can see, in a collective of liberation, when it's liberated, if all those people are free from fear, they can communicate with each other, and they can go forward, and they can progress. They can, yeah. So it's an addition. What is it? I'm sorry. My English is bad today. I'm always looking for words. It's the same for a single person or for a collective. It
would be transformative for a group
a
to not
people
act.
full of individuals that are full of fear. It's a horror, I think. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it's the same.
Great. Okay. I like that. Anna?
Thank you. I think this is absolutely very, very beautiful, and the sentence which really got to me is there is no agency with fear. So if you're scared, you have no agency. And I think this is very profound, and both for the individual, but also for society. In an ideal world, this would mean at Passover, but not only at Passover, that everybody would have agency, and we wouldn't be scared. We wouldn't fear the other person for the agency, So we could act together, truly, on the same level. And I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Or would be beautiful.
Yeah, even as the Exodus story continues, like I said earlier, the Israelites, they still act from fear in their wanderings in the desert. They weren't able to, as a group, achieve and sustain that kind of lack of fear and feel a sense of agency when they get to the edge of the promised land and send the scouts, and the scouts bring back the report that, oh no, we'd never be able to fight back against the Canaanites. Then they just get swept up in fear as a group and lose their capacity to move forward. So yeah, that's when I think what I like the groups highlighting is when we first see that Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer, it seems like Rabbi Yehoshua is offering something much more, that this night is when redemption is going to happen. Woo! But, and then Rabbi Eliezer is saying one night where you don't feel fear. But what we're pointing out as a group is that the removal of fear would be tremendously transformative, and maybe show us a path forward that we had never seen before. Eleanor.
May I add another thought? If we take this concept of Passover seriously, we have a very strong medicine against depression, because being depressed means having lost the sight of any agency, feeling completely hopeless. So being a person of faith is a blessing, seen from this perspective.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yes. I'm not sure where we should go from there, or maybe we'll wrap up at this time, and we'll come back to the specific questions on the order of the Seder. Now that we've set kind of a philosophy to it, we're looking for either a removal of fear or a vision of redemption. And then we'll see next time, do these details of the Seder. What is Shmur Matzah? Do we need to care about this stricture or that? Does it have a lesson that could help us go towards removal of fear or a vision of redemption? Or is it just one of those crazy things that Jews have come up with over the last 2,000 years to make our lives more difficult? Hopefully we get more of the former, but there'll probably be a little bit of the latter. And All right, so we will wrap up here. Thank you everyone for your many contributions of questions and thoughts and participation. Please unmute to wish each other Erev Tov, a good evening, guten Abend.
Bye, Rabbi Tobias. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
It was very
Kivia,
interesting.
Miriam, Andrew, Eric,
Thank
Shana,
you.
Karen,
Shabbat
Eleanor.
Thank
shalom.
you.
Shabbat shalom.
All right, see
Thank
you
you.
all soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Good night.